Hi, I'm Brittany Ashley, your host of Breaking Norms, Building Dreams, your guide through this transformative journey in both business and life. This is your place crafted for dreamers, doers, or anyone who has been told they can't. Get ready as we challenge those narratives together. You're tuning in live to the United Public Radio Network, airing on 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. We are streaming on all the popular platforms every Monday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Join me for a candid and thought-provoking conversation celebrating your unique journey because you are worth it. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday. We are pre-recording today, and I have not even had a chance to even get ready today. It's one of those, we're actually filming on Friday for Monday's show because I have a doctor's appointment that I've been waiting for over a lifetime, it feels like, so I can't miss it. So I apologize to any of our returning listeners, but I'm excited to have our guest today, Alex, on the show. So before we dig in, happy Monday, because you're listening on Monday. Welcome to Breaking Norms, Building Dreams. I'm your host, Brittany Ashley, and we are broadcasting live on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 and 107.7 FM in lovely New Orleans. Get ready to escape the next hour as we break norms and build dreams today with Alex. Alex, I'm so excited to have you today.
Oh, thank you so much. It's a privilege and an honor, and I'm super excited about this conversation.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So who's Alex? Let's dig in, because usually I start that way. So I have Alex's short little bio, but then I'll pass it to you, Alex, to kind of talk a little bit about who you are. Alex helps women find connection and belonging through soul work. She is a spiritual guide with, maybe you can recorrect me if I'm saying this wrong, Alex, Crucentra? Q-Centra? How do you say that? And a Canadian settler.
Quechua.
Quechua. And a Canadian settler roots and leads women's circles for over the 10 years. A messaging expert, Alex writes powerful, value-driven content for women in business. She has her master's degree in development studies and lives in Toronto. So maybe you can dig a little bit more and tell the listeners. I know you gave me a big bio, but through my lessons of doing this for some time, I like to pass it over to you and dig a little bit more in your story.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks for the sweet introduction. So yeah, I'll start with that word that was difficult to pronounce, because I think that's where the beginning for me really is. So Quechua Nation. So the Quechua Nation is a First Nations in the Andes, and it is where my maternal lineage is rooted. So my maternal grandmother was Quechua, full. And my mom was born to her, half Quechua and half German American. And then, of course, I was born to my mom and a Canadian settler heritage dad. Yeah. And yeah, so I'm a really, my dad used to say, what did he say? He said, I'm a Heinz 57, which was, I guess, in his generation, how they described mutts or dogs, just a mix of everything. But it was always in our family something that was really celebrated. And the other thing that was really celebrated in our nuclear family was Indigenous culture, Indigenous wisdom, Indigenous ways. And that was kind of at an academic level a little bit, or a cultural level a little bit. But what I hadn't realized, I think, until very recently, and I'm 51 now, but what I hadn't realized, I think, until recently was that actually it wasn't just this academic sort of admiration and respect for the First Nations here in what is now Canada. It was also part of my upbringing, because the values and the belief system that my mother had learned by being raised in a small mining town in the highlands of Bolivia, where she was raised by, the people around her were all Quechua. Her little friends were all Quechua. Like that, all of that was embedded in her, and she passed it on to my sister and I. She taught us about the Pachamama. She hugged trees and talked about El Tío, who was the protector deity of the mine. And so we learned these things that felt normal to me. She talked about, she was the woman, Brittany, who was embarrassing when I was a teenager, would be going to the shop with her reused plastic bags and all her like, cloth bags before anybody was doing it, because she honored that she was part of this consumption cycle and that we were responsible. And she was talking about that.
Yeah, I love that. You're cutting in and out for a second there. When you moved your hand, it cut out.
Okay,
there you go. Yeah.
It will be very difficult.
I was just going to say, because I am Métis, and I love that you brought this up, because we are Métis, and a lot of my heritage, I'm learning, and unfortunately there has been broken heritage and all of this. So I'm rerouting my roots and understanding it. I actually was just talking to my auntie about, because I was saying I struggle with dyslexia, and I've mentioned it multiple times through this show, ADHD, but I struggle with saying the names of the language, because I struggle with my words as a dyslexic adult. And so I'm like, sometimes when I see words like that, like my brain goes 100 million miles a minute, and I don't know how to pronounce it. And then I feel very like, oh my goodness, I didn't say it right, because it's also my culture. But for anybody listening, you have to start somewhere and start to learn it to break down those barriers. And so asking the questions of how to pronounce something, don't be scared to ask. And I'm learning, because I want to start going to like the friendship center. And I know that when I want to meet the aunties, I need to understand a little bit.
Yeah. And what's so beautiful, I think, about First Nations peoples that I've met and who are now like bringing their wisdom out and exploring that wisdom is the openness.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like, and I'm not going to lie and say that it's been all, rainbows and unicorns, because, and I'm not even talking about like the pain and agony that colonization was. I'm talking about like the more recent appropriation and commodification of Indigenous ways and rituals and ceremonies. But it's more that I feel as though there's this sense, as long as there's appreciation, their wisdom is there to share, or our wisdom is there to share. See how I'm like they, our, their, our, me, them, like, because I feel like I've learned how to navigate this world as a white presenting, large, mostly settler, but inside the value system, the way I feel connected and related to people and the earth, that was always planted in me in a very, very different way. So I have this, like I'm still learning. Of course, we're always going to be learning, but it's like this internal conversation all the time. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense to you?
Yes. Yeah. I love that. I feel like too, like, this is why I love the radio show, so we can educate and just be open to learning than judging. And the more we can bring this kind of conversation to the show and quiet the judging and start asking, I wish we were live, because then we can have like just questions about culture and all the things. So unfortunately, we'll just have Alex back, is what I'm just going to get into.
I would love to, so I've never had like an interactive experience, and I would love to do that, because I'd love to be exposed to the questions that are out there.
Yeah.
I really feel like right now, Brittany, there's this craving, almost like a desperate craving for a new way of doing, a new way of being that will will heal us from like the capitalist, extractive, patriarchal system that has come to be, and that we really need to start talking about it. We really need to start trying to answer questions. We really need to start exploring this theme, and that drive or that interest and curiosity is because things aren't working right now. And personally, I believe that the answer lies in earth-centered ways of being and doing, this ancient wisdom that exists amongst some, but for many, like you and I, we were talking about, like for many, that heritage has been taken away. And I'm not going to say disappeared, because I think it's still there, but difficult to access.
Exactly. And I was just going to say, like, for some, like me, because I don't have, a lot of my relatives are kind of scattered throughout, but a good chunk of them live in Prince Rupert or further other ways. But a good chunk do live up there. And I feel that living here in Victoria, for those listening, I'm in Victoria, BC. I don't know where to go. Like, yeah, we have the Friendship Center, we have this place or whichever, but it'd be nice to kind of talk to a relative, I guess, one, just like that comfort and know a bit more about it. Because I think for me, I feel like, oh yes, like I am proud Métis. I really want to learn more. Like I crave that, but I'm also ashamed.
Why are you ashamed?
I guess this is just because I don't know enough.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So maybe if you're because it sounds like your mom really educated their heritage with you. Do you have any kind of tips for anyone who's just wanting to kind of dig? It doesn't even matter what your heritage is. Maybe it just could be in general sense of where to start. And then also for those who are listening, who are First Nation here in Canada.
I mean, I think that like the real sort of crux of the matter is that we understand ourselves, and we've been raised and conditioned to believe that we are actually separate from nature and superior to.
Yeah.
But I think a starting point in terms of how you navigate the world in a different way, in a land-centered, earth revering, or worshiping, maybe not worshiping is the word, maybe revering or respecting way, is to acknowledge that we are her.
Yeah.
We are nature. We are not separate. And if that is true, then that means that we're affected by the seasons, right?
Yeah.
That each season will have a different influence on what's going on inside us and the way our energetics work. It also means that we were born of the earth and we will return to the earth when we die, that death is part of the cycle. And I think we live in a society that pretends that it isn't. And also that this consumption pattern that we are a part of, again, we take things from the mother and then they will go back to the mother. So everything that we consume is part of a cycle, this consumption cycle. And just to think about that when making your purchases, when, I think it is about like consumer choice as well. So I think that there's just different ways of, if you see yourself as part of a cycle, as part of a cycle of nature, as part of nature, then your interaction is a little bit more conscious because you've got skin in the game. And I think that's what the Great Mother is telling us right now. You've got skin in the game, and guess what? Like, you haven't been honoring that, and you're going to suffer as a consequence because you are part of the system that you are actually extracting so much from and contaminating so desperately that, she's suffering. I actually see, Brittany, this is a controversial statement and not based on science, but I believe, as are most of my statements, but I believe that, I believe in something really good, and it's just slipped my mind. Hold on, it's going to come back. What were we just saying?
We're talking about Mother Earth and how the consumption
Oh yeah, I was going to say, oh yeah, the controversial statement. I believe that like the environmental crisis and the mental health crisis are one and the same, that you
Mm.
can't actually separate it
Yeah.
because I think that, she's suffering and struggling and panicking.
Hmm.
And whether consciously we are saying we are her and therefore we are endangered as well,
Hmm.
um, we actually like are experiencing it as anxiety and depression and all these different ways, right? But that they're actually really interconnected.
Hmm. Well, like if you look at seasonal depression.
Yeah, yeah. And winter, it's interesting, like right now, when this airs, we're at the end of November, beginning of December.
Hmm.
And this is a time where people start ramping up, right? Oh my God, let's get the party on the schedule. Let's like make sure we're organized, the gifts, the tree, like all the things. And
It's more
what
stressful
Nate,
than anything.
what's that?
I say it's more stressful because I
I
feel like
know, I
everything's
know.
happening up. And so many people are so like the economy in itself this year has been very difficult for a lot of small businesses, entrepreneurs. And then with us ramping up, I feel like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot more mean people. And I'm like, why is like, if we can just be kind,
Oh,
ask for some help. It's okay to ask for help. I feel like sometimes we forget that it's okay to ask for help. But when people are in a state of chaos and a state of like economic harsh times, I think the it's like it comes on then of people kind of gluing into like us all of a sudden of judgment and or just angry, just
yes.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And again, I think that's speaking to the fact that, you know, we have been taught that as individuals, we can make it. We don't need help. We don't need anybody else.
Yeah.
Even the way a lot of the time entrepreneurs tell their stories online, like my, individual success story looks like this, and this is how I made it, rags to riches, instead of acknowledging that this person helped me along the way, or my husband's support helped me along the way, or this mentor guided me, and here's a teacher here, and that was actually this really messy journey that is recognizant or recognizes
Mhm.
that, we are interconnected and we rise together. And when
Mhm.
somebody becomes mean and angry and won't ask for help, I think it's because they feel stuck alone as this individual when actually we are a collective. If you look at nature, it's this super sophisticated, eloquent interconnectivity
Yeah.
of beings that really is all about giving life.
Mhm.
And we too are interconnected and dependent on one another.
Yeah. Um, when you were just speaking there, it made me think. So I just was on the panel for WeBC in the forum. I'm this year has been a lot more for my public speaking. So I've been traveled to Vancouver, did speaking. So if anyone's listening and looking for a speaker, just throwing it out there. Um, I did speaking on a range of topics this year, specifically on like imposter syndrome, how to overcome it, to how to build a business, an agency, and how to outsource efficiently, and how to work with a virtual assistant OBM. But this one that I was on a week and a half ago, time's flying by. It was a panel. I've now realized panels are very hard to do with someone with ADHD because I'm just like hyper focused to hear everybody else's answer because I also want to learn from them or learn about their experience that I forgot the question sometimes. But on the note of what I was trying to get to is one of the questions was, how did you build your business based on community? And I kid you not, I did cry. I was like, oh,
Oh,
they're like, Brittany, how to? And everybody like in the panel though was just kind of like, oh, I had a mentor, I had all these things. And I was like, let's shake it up here because business isn't just all like this. Like, if we want to get to the root of it, building a business is hard. And to build a community, it takes time. I've been doing this for 6 years and I'm still trying to find the community to make make myself feel like I'm stable in some kind of senses. And attracting those within my values and making sure that I'm feeling supported in the ways that I need than being brought down. Because I find it, a lot of business owners can be competitive, and I'm just a natural like person of, I feel like it doesn't matter if we have the same business model, we can all come together and collaborate and work together and build each other up, especially we as women. It's so competitive. So why are we competing against each other when we can really support each other to the next level?
That's probably what brought us together, actually, Brittany, because we came together in Entreprenista, which for your listeners is a, women entrepreneur platform that in many ways is so super unique, because the women in that group, at least it's been my experience, that the women in that group are all about lifting one another up. What is the expression, that tide lifts all ships, or something like that?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Something like that. So just this, it's a great metaphor, if one rises, we all rise. And that seems to be the real ethos in this community and in some of the other communities I'm in. I've been in entrepreneurship for 15 years. So like you, I have experienced that competitive nature and the truth, and also not only competitive, but very transactional approach, right?
Yeah. I don't like, it drives me bananas. Like, I've had people be like, somebody started an agency and they're like, oh, I wanted to be like you and make money. I'm like, do you not read my website? I did not start this business to make money. I started this business to help support moms, women, to be financially stable at home. Like, that's my why. That's my passion. Or to support business owners to educate themselves on how to build a successful business. Like, that's my why. Like, I have so many whys. It was not out of profit. It was out of passion. And so I get like so like aggravated, I've noticed. Like, that's not my why.
Well, it's beautiful. I mean, because you're driven by something different that in and of itself is aligned, I think, with, well, not only with your values, but I think with the values that we're talking about here today, community, putting people before profit, and lifting women up. I think that's something that both of us do. I think we're also actually both passionate about moms.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, I think we definitely had so much synergy when we first met.
Yeah.
On all of the topics. That's why I also wanted you on this show. I feel like we can talk about all the things for so long. But yeah, like, going back to the community piece, it does, for anyone listening, and as an entrepreneur, if you're alone, like I was saying, it's okay to ask for help. Like, I looked inwards to like my friends first and my husband to have that kind of extra support, because I couldn't find the community when I was in networking groups, or like, and it's taken me a hard time, and I still have a hard time with it, not understanding why somebody might like me. Like, why? I'm like a people pleaser. I'm a Libra. So to me, like, that's like, it shakes me a little bit, because I'm like, we can all get together. We can all thrive. We can, like, why can't we? I had a networking call back, and the person was a similar business model. And they're like, I've heard a lot about you. I'm like, oh, that's great. And then it's like nothing positive after, it felt like. They're just like, yeah, we can chat. I was like, oh, I guess you don't want to work together. You don't want to stay interconnected. I was like, whichever. But it made me realize, I think that moment, I was like, why am I trying so hard for people to like to accept me, where it's wasted time when you're trying to understand why somebody might not like you. You know that theory by Mel Robbins, let them?
No, tell me more.
It's kind of my kind of in a way of helped me reposition my mindset, I would say, this year, and reevaluate things, instead of me hyper focusing on why somebody doesn't want to collaborate, or doesn't want to work with me, or whichever, or think of it's me a competitor. It's more or less, let them judge you, let them put you in that box, let them waste their energy on these things. If you're ready to move on with the next chapter in your life, move on with all these things, move on and put your energy there, because you're going to be more likely move mountains over here than time wasted kind of obsessing about the people that want to judge or put you in that box that you don't belong into. So
Yeah.
let them do that while you go do your thing. And so
Yeah.
that's the thing I've stepped in so much more this year. And the mind shift has been like crazy.
Yeah, this is great. And different people are at different places and in their journey, and that's fine. But I think us as feminine leaders who are seeking to do things in a different way, there are a few things that we need to do for ourselves to make sure that we're effective and impactful in our work. And one of those is surrounding ourselves with like-minded, aligned, valued sisters and brothers who really believe in our project and in our vision, and the other thing that I think is really important that for me keeps me aligned and connected with my values, but also offers me courage to do things differently is and this is harder for you, Brittany, because you've got littler people than I do. My kids are older now, 14, 17, and 20, and yours are still 4 and 6. Is that right?
3 and 6.
3 and 6. Okay, so just tiny. Oh, those are the cute days, but those are the intense days, right?
Yeah.
So what I was going to say is that very important to carve out some space for yourself in some shape or form. And like at your stage in life, that could look like, the commute from drop off to home, right? Or like whatever, the half-hour walk that you can take, or, for me, it's looking differently, just to let you know, space does open up. But I think that space to commune with where your body's at, where your intuition and soul is at, to commune with nature.
Yeah.
Like, I think that is also really key in supporting us.
Yeah, I love that. We're already pretty much at the midway point, because I wanted to go into the next question. But before I do, for anyone just listening in, welcome to Breaking Norms, Building Dreams. And we are live on United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Radio Network 105.3 and 107.7 FM in New Orleans. You think I'd remember that by now? It's just a tongue twister. Really
it is a tongue twister.
It's a tongue twister, and I want to make sure I get it right. I was going to ask you about decision-making and intuition.
Okay.
How does intuition maybe guide your decisions making as a business owner?
Yeah, well, I think in many ways, and this is something that I've grappled with, because sometimes intuition will tell you to do something weird and wonderful, but that doesn't always align with what business owners or entrepreneurs have been taught, what seemingly makes sense or feels rational. And so it becomes this sort of, should I do this or should I do that? Or what is my truth? And so I think that intuition is like any muscle, and it just needs practice, and it just needs to know that it has value and that you will listen. And it takes time to learn how to do that, and also to have the trust and faith that the guidance you're receiving is, the correct guidance for you at that time. So how do I do that? Again, like, it's that space piece, making time to pause and connecting to my intuition. It's the trust and the faith, like I mentioned, to actually take action in that way. Intuition for me often means or having an intuitive-led business or a soul-led business often means trying things that maybe other people haven't tried before, being a little bit experimental. And it means being okay when that doesn't work out, and knowing that there's a lesson in any choice that you make. Right. So it's the other thing about all of this and being an intuitive-led business is that because it requires the space that we talked about,
Mhm.
It means no more hustle and grind.
Mhm.
And that's for me, who I'm a recovering type A
Yeah.
and who feels most comfortable, even if it means exhausting myself,
Mhm.
doing. It means having some kind of a self-care structure or schedule or routine that makes sure that I am following my own bodily rhythms. Because if I'm like in this perpetual productivity mode,
Mhm.
not only will I get tired, but I won't hear what I'm supposed to hear in order to move forward,
Yeah.
right?
And I
Did I answer your question?
Yeah, and I was just thinking of all these other questions as I'm going in so many different directions now. But I wanted to say, I totally, because I do have little ones, but I'm also, like everyone has listened to, or if you're new, I'm self-diagnosed with ADHD because it's interconnected with dyslexia. The more I've been doing research on it and other researchers I've connected with, and I go 100 million miles a minute. And I think it's my dopamine hits that, because everyone's like, "I can't keep track. You're doing what now? You're on the board of what now? Aren't you on the 2 boards now? Like, where are you fitting your time?" I'm like, "I don't know." But that's part of me, like, I guess if it's in alignment to my values of giving back, I think that's kind of like the purpose of why I'm doing what I'm doing. So it does light my fire even more. So I'm actually in the new year, I'll be the board of directors of the chamber here in Langford. And everyone's like, "How are you going to do that?" I was like, "Well, because I see doing X, Y, and Z in the community. It's not just extra work, it's how I can build the business, also still being a thought leader into the community. And that gives me that extra foot in the door to do it. It's not, to me, extra work, I guess. Or I'm also on the Female Wave of Change marketing director. So to me, like that's still giving women that empowerment too piece, not just building this business. It goes like so much further than just building a business and giving back too.
Yeah. And, I wonder also if, and again, controversial statement, but, maybe your ADHD is a gift because it gives you that capacity to focus in different directions and in a way that creates like a web of impact.
Yeah, everyone
Does that make
I
sense?
yeah, yeah. I consider my ADHD a gift. I've realized it's taken me a lot of time to realize that my dyslexia and ADHD are my gift. But the more I think I've been doing like the self-healing journey this year and reflection, I was like, it's my superpower. Like, I don't like when I go into certain rooms, and just because I have small kids, I've been super hyper focused on spotting out people with neurodivergence. And it's not because I'm like, you have it, you have it. It's because I'm understanding my own experience, and I've opened my eyes a lot more. And then like, okay, and it makes you kind of be a little bit more compassionate too. Like I'm already am compassionate person. I understand we all learn differently, but I think it helped me appreciate it a lot more, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. The other thing, and like just bringing it back down to like nature being our teacher and ancient
Mm,
wisdom, is that diversity is fundamental for the survival of everything.
yeah.
And so, why do we think that everybody's brain has to work in the same way?
Yeah.
We need neurodivergency so that people are looking at the world in different ways and can. The problem is we've got a system that doesn't support that.
No.
The system supports the one brain, one type of brain. But hopefully, we're moving forward in a way that is a little bit more, or is, I'm not going to say a little bit, is more supportive period of neurodivergency. So I think if we think of that word diversity
Yeah.
and, how we can bring that into our society as a value.
Mm, yeah. I feel too, like, because I think in my previous shows, I've talked about that my son was going through autism testing and all these things. And it's like a new kind of, okay, what is this? And it's making me learn too, there's different kinds of neurodiversities. And I think if we can try to even just educate each other just slightly, helps us kind of understand a bit more and have that grace. And I'm all about let's give each other grace, because we just don't understand what somebody's gone through in the last 20 minutes in their life or an hour in their life that maybe really had a ripple effect. And
Yeah.
so being so mindful in those pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. And that thing you said about compassion too, I think, slowing down is required for us to open our hearts to people who we don't understand how they work. This is not a bad thing not to understand. Shouldn't that be something that evokes curiosity and compassion?
Yeah. Well, I'll just use, for example, like myself, I do not like phones. I've realized it's probably inner trauma of working at a bad place that I'm just like for working, like I prefer not to do phones. I'll do a Zoom. To me, that's better than a phone call because I like to be able to see people's faces, expressions, and how their mannerisms are. But on the phone, I feel like I can't predict that. And it gives me a lot more anxiety. So I prefer Zoom and or email if I can push it. And I realized that a lot more people like the phone. It's hard. Like, why can't we just have a Zoom call? And I'm like, ugh, trying to like change my mindset a bit on trying to get onto the phones. But it's hard when sometimes if you've maybe had some kind of trauma around something that has impacted it. So there's always solutions, I think, to a problem. It's just a matter of us taking the time to find that solution. If it's a phone call to, I don't know, something in business, like whichever.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, that conversation around like, well, this works for me and this doesn't work for me. And what could work for both of us, taking the time to have those conversations and exploring and learning that openness instead of this idea that things have to be this one way.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. We're just like running. I have a lot of, well, I've said a lot of trauma in my last show. It's Shavisa. But I've realized like how much trauma I've had within the school setting and that I'm kind of a bit, I guess, I know we all need to go to school, but sometimes I wish I would have just went maybe more in the work setting and learned that way than being in the school setting, but not to say I didn't learn things. But it's just kind of, it's the old way of thinking sometimes, the school system. And
Yeah, it's so outdated to even what we know about children's psychology and development and neurodivergency and all of it. And now anxiety, there's a huge mental health crisis with our youth. It's just an out of date system that isn't catching up as quickly. I mean, if you suffered with it and that was decades ago, like it should have shifted, but they're like these old machines that take ages to change and there's so much resistance but
I've
yeah,
seen
they're out of date.
they've changed slightly with certain people of understanding neurodivergence. But I feel like there's a lot of change that still needs to be done. I was just talking to a mom and she ended up pulling her kid out because the teacher just didn't understand neurodivergency and didn't think that there was a place for him in this classroom. I was like, that riles me up.
Yeah.
Totally. I'm like, that lights my fire. Let's go talk to them right now. Because that's pretty much like my whole life. Like I would say, like, I remember this teacher, if he's listening, Mr. Materi. I know he's been fired from the school system, but it's teachers like that put your certain names on your file thinking that you're not worthy to be in a certain classroom. And it's like, who are you to say that, right? So this mom that I was talking to, I was like, that just fires me up. And I think that's probably why I was saying, like on the panel, going back to that, they're like, where do you see yourself in whatever years? I'm like, hopefully maybe a motivational speaker on things like that, because we need more motivational speakers to really support the youth and which maybe even adults who might be struggling, who didn't have the means that I did to get to where I am. Right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we need to start speaking the things. I was on a podcast by a woman called Kate Mosher, and she asked me, what was it? Speaking the quiet things out loud. I
Yeah.
think that was the expression, mean to you, and how do you do that? And what I'm hearing you say, Brittany, is like, speaking the things that haven't been said that need to be said is,
Mm.
really important. And I think that's why you and I do what we do the way we do it, because we're talking about things that haven't been addressed, and we're doing things in a way that hasn't been addressed. So we're bringing things to the fore that perhaps have been invisible.
Or they have acknowledged it to some point and just pushed it under the mat, and hopefully it doesn't get brought back up.
Band-aid solutions, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've seen some changes because my daughter's in school now, just to say the least, because when I was in school, it was called the Disability Center. I don't know if people still call this in their school, but I hated that word of like, oh, Brittany's off to the Disability Center. And I'm like, I'm not disabled. Like, you know what I mean? But what I'm learning too is that I do have a disability, but how they labeled it in school, it was like you're trying to hide it because you don't want to show that
Yeah.
to the people in your class and
Yeah.
whichever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. It's like, yeah. But it implies that there's something wrong with the child when actually it's a system that doesn't address the needs of a divergent population. It's a systemic problem. It's not the problem of the individual, and the language needs to reflect that.
Exactly.
So that the child doesn't take that on.
Exactly. The school that my daughter's in, they call it the inclusion center. So, which is a lot better, I would say.
Yep.
I feel like if that was that in our school, I'd probably be like, yeah, I'm just going to the inclusion center. Like,
Yeah. And that addresses the systemic issue like straight on, right? Because what was happening was these kids were being excluded. Yeah, that's great.
Especially like because we're in Canada, we're told that we need to know French. Quebecois. And I don't know French because I got a special block to be in the disability center and got a special note not to learn French and all these things. And so I was always ashamed not knowing French because of it kind of made me look like I felt anyways that I was too good to learn French, and I got put in this block, I guess one would say. But everybody else who was not struggling had to be forced into this program, which they didn't want to learn. So it's just I don't know what to say, twofold, I guess, like looking into it.
Like an attempt, are you saying that learning French was an attempt at inclusivity, but not really relevant where you are?
Well, we're told like you need to have French to graduate. I don't know if it's changed because it's been like 100 years. It feels like.
No, I think it's a national policy that one needs to have French to graduate. I mean, so I was raised in Ottawa, which is the capital where, I say that for anybody who's listening who is not familiar with our country, but in Ottawa, there's a huge advantage to having French because if you want to work for the government, the federal government, you need to know it. And also Ottawa happens to be on the border with Quebec. Yeah. So there are, francophones, and that it makes it easy. And so I also had the advantage of having Spanish already. And when you have one language that's when you've been raised with two languages in your brain, it's easier to pick up on another one, especially if one of them was a Latin language, as Spanish is. So I had the advantage, but I think like it was relevant, right?
Yeah.
It was relevant. And so to the land, again, like to the geography, it was relevant. I even sometimes think, I'm a little bit radical though, as you probably have guessed, but I even think because I've lived around the world in lots of places, I have made a concerted effort to learn the languages of where I've been. So when we lived in Mozambique, which was a former Portuguese colony, I learned Portuguese. And I even tried to learn Shangana, which was the native language or the language of the indigenous people. I failed. I tried. It's a very difficult language. And I even thought, why isn't it that we all learn, at least so in this area, the dominant sort of language probably would have been in pre-colonial times, Anishinaabe. And I always wonder, like, I think people should be learning Anishinaabe. Can you imagine? That'd be so hard.
Yeah.
But anyway, I just like language to me feels like something that should be rooted in the geography and in the culture and in the place. And I think for a lot of Canadians, French is not that.
Yeah.
It's sort of imposed by this small group of people in one place, and it just doesn't resonate.
French is hard. Well, I just know one word now, but
it's hard. Learning a language is hard.
Even just like the English language, they say, is the hardest thing to learn. And I was saying to somebody else, like I struggled so, like I do still have dyslexia. It doesn't just ever go away, but you can work at it to figure out how to overcome certain things. But like in grade 12, like even my girlfriend Julie was always making fun of me, like I can never understand your text messages because there's so many spelling issues.
Aww.
And I was like, yeah, I don't know how to spell. I hardly knew how to spell in grade 12. It's taken me, feels like 100 years to still learn, but now like we have advanced technology to help me out and sound things out, which has been amazing. But with French or any other language, I feel like my brain just doesn't even want to compute it.
Yeah. Well, and part of that can be, part of that can be trauma. And part of that can just be like what's relevant for you and, and what's not.
Yeah. I'm just looking at the time because we're almost at time. So, but before we kind of almost wrap up, I want to know, how do you hope to inspire others through your work in leadership?
Oh, such a good question. How do I work to inspire others in leadership? Is that what you said?
In your work and or leadership, or both?
Yeah, so I think I haven't really spoken much about the work that I do, but I guess I'd like to say that I really hope to inspire others by showing or demonstrating that it's possible to lead and create from a place of like really deep alignment with one's values, one's intuition, and with the rhythms and wisdom of the earth. Like through the work that I do, I aim to sort of show that feminine leadership, which I think both of us practice, is rooted in reciprocity, community, and reverence for the sacred, and that it can be this like a force of transformation for personal healing and systemic change. I want for people to feel empowered to honor their intuition and to trust their unique path and to be able to have that confidence and that courage and the clarity to take action on that path in ways that contribute to a more connected and regenerative world. Like the brand name that I'm working with is Conectada, which in Spanish means connected. And so the real aim of the work that I do, principally ceremonial work, is about healing the disconnect we have with our bodies as women and with our planet.
I love that. It's amazing. I can't wait to see more that you do, because I know you're going to do amazing things. You and I connect quite a bit. So I know we'll keep in touch, and you'll come back on the show and you can update us more on all the amazing things you do. Is there any other last thoughts that you would like to share with the listeners? I have your IG account here. If anyone wants to follow Alex at the bottom, it's Alex. If you're listening, it's Alex, ALEX _INESSENCE to follow Alex along on Instagram. Alex is just doing her website, so it shall be live soon in the works.
Yeah. It's in the works, and I do hope for it to come to life soon. Other things I think I'd like to add is that I just, I really feel right now, Brittany, that the Great Mother is asking us to do things differently, and that the answers, because like the prescriptive and sort of instructions, the way we've been conditioned, isn't working. And we see it's not working in I heard the expression, the polycrisis that surrounds us, right? Like this, environmental, social, like all the things that are happening at the same time. There are messages, there are flare-ups, there are signs that things need to be done differently. And so the way we as business owners can do things differently is, I think, by honoring ourselves and therefore our businesses as an extension of nature, using our intuition as our leadership compass, and also seeing leadership as more than just telling other people what to do, but more of like healing work and bringing in collaborations and lifting people up. And then I think another thing that's really important for us is to honor, we're not going to have time to talk about like the difference between feminine principles and masculine principles, but I do want to say that when I say feminine, I'm not talking about female, and when I say masculine, I'm not talking about male. It's more like the concepts of yin and yang, and that everybody, man or woman, girl or boy, has both feminine and masculine energies inside of them.
Yeah.
But that what's been happened is that the masculine has been valued and the feminine has been ignored or suppressed. So in order to bring things into balance, my thinking is that we need to honor feminine principles in leadership, and in that way challenge patriarchal and capitalistic norms. And I'm talking about principles like intuition, embodiment, cyclical living, these sorts of things. I think also like empowering others through connection, creating that space for restorative practices, and really root ourselves in this sacred responsibility that we have, not only, like you said, for us to be making money as business owners, but that sacred responsibility to our four-legged brothers and sisters, our two-legged brothers and sisters, or our flying brothers and sisters, and the trees, and just everything that surrounds, like we have a sacred responsibility. And I really believe that right now, there's like cries from the earth, the great Pachamama, as my mother would call her, to honor those responsibilities and to do things differently. I think that's kind of what I'd like to leave people thinking a little bit about as they move forward in their project, in their business projects, and in the way they live their life.
I love that. Thank you, Alex, so much. And just to quickly tie to that, I find sometimes we get lost a little bit along the way because it's so noisy in the world. And really, when you have those intuition, gut instincts, try to go with them. There's so many times where I try to push back on it, and then it comes flying back like, should have listened to my gut, and I knew it. So try to like step more into that. So I love that. For those listening, thank you so much for listening to Breaking Norms, Building Dreams. A big thank you to United Public Radio Network and UFO Paranormal Network. Next week, we will have Christine in, and we are talking a bit about just how men can come in and work with coaches and all of that. So I'm excited to get her perspective on her works. And then the last day we'll be having Annabelle in for the last day for the show, and then we won't be back until the new year. So please come join in if you can in the last 2 episodes, Breaking Norms, Building Dreams. With that, everyone, remember your journey is unique and your worth is unquestionable. Thank you.
Aw.